Welcome to From Betrayal to Breakthrough. I'm Dr. Debbie Silber, and today's guest is Chelsea Brooke Cole. Chelsea Brooke Cole is a licensed psychotherapist, certified partner trauma therapist, and speaker specializing in narcissistic abuse and complex trauma. Chelsea is routinely featured in USA Today and other media, including Psychology Today, WKRN News 2, and Fox 26 Houston. She's the author of the best-selling book, If Only I'd Known: How to Outsmart Narcissists, Set Guilt-Free Boundaries, and Create Unshakable Self-Worth. Chelsea's content provides support to thousands of narcissistic abuse survivors each day through her thriving online community and group program. Chelsea Brooke Cole is a licensed psychotherapist and author who specializes in narcissistic abuse and what makes us vulnerable to it. Today we're going to dive deep into agreeableness, why your kindness, your desire to see the best in others, and your compassion can be the very things that narcissists exploit. If you've ever felt like you're doing everything right and still being mistreated, this is the clarity you've been waiting for. Let's dive in. Okay, everybody, I'm with Chelsea Brooke Cole today. And the reason why I invited her on the show is because she's had some kind of stuff going on with some narcissists in the past. And I thought she had plenty to share about it. Most importantly, what do we do with all of it? We're going to be talking about agreeableness and the narcissist and so much more. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah. So let's get started with, of course, you don't teach this and study something like this unless, there's a story behind it or a need. So can you share?
I know. Yeah, people are always like, how do you get into this work? I'm like, well, you don't just end up specializing in narcissistic abuse for no reason. So it's funny because I feel like it's something that I've like kind of been preparing for my whole life, but didn't know what I was dealing with. And I say that because I've been dealing with narcissism my whole life, but wouldn't have called it that. So I grew up with a dad who I was always very curious about why he acted one way in public and another in private. And he was very cold and distant, cared more about control than connection. And that, I grew up knowing like something is off here, something is wrong with him, but I also felt like something was wrong with me too. It kind of left me feeling flawed and defective and damaged. I would see other people having healthy homes and healthy family and parental relationships. And I'm like, I don't have that. And so that's really the mindset that I, went into my early adult relationships with, kind of feeling like not enough, very used to feeling like I needed to earn love and earn connection. And that led me to be in a couple of very painful and poignant narcissistic relationships. So I ended up dating and marrying two different types of narcissists. The first was a grandiose with malignant tendencies, and it kind of got a little dicey and concerning toward the end. And so he and I divorced. He had an affair on a work trip, and so I thought after that, you know what? I don't want anybody like that. Like
And you know what? And Chelsea, I want to dive into that a bit. So
yeah,
I don't want to just fluff over the two types of narcissists
yes,
that you married. So can you tell us what that means? Let's go
yep.
into the grandiose and all of that.
Absolutely. So grandiose narcissists tend to be charming, charismatic. They're kind of the stereotypical narcissist. Like when people hear the term narcissist, they're like, oh, they're like selfish, they're arrogant, they can be difficult at times, but also charming, kind of likable because of their charm, but they're very contemptuous and critical and like overtly abusive. So it's like you can kind of see them sometimes because of the arrogance and the charm. Vulnerable narcissists, we often mistake for very kind of sullen, withdrawn. Even therapists will see them as depressed.
Mhm.
They can be very nice. They can be very victimized. They tend to have these sad stories about how life hasn't went their way. People have been out to get them. So you're much more likely to feel sorry for and kind of pity for a vulnerable narcissist, whereas a grandiose narcissist, you'll feel charmed by, or sometimes even a little bit off put by how arrogant they are.
I love that description. And I want everybody right now, if you're listening, if you're watching, take a moment and realize the ones, the obvious sort of narcissist, but the other types. And
Yeah.
those are, I find those to be some of the biggest energy vampires. because of the need, and they're in so
Yes.
much pain and we want to save them, and meanwhile we're kind of subtly, not so subtly, being manipulated in that much, in so much more.
Very much, which is why I'm very excited to get to the agreeableness because it has so much to do with why we end up, or how I guess how we end up staying, and yeah, how
Yeah,
much of
so
a
let's get
vampire they
back to,
are.
because I completely cut you off. I just wanted to,
You're
I
good.
just said the two types. So your
Yeah.
first marriage was with the first type of
Yeah,
narcissist.
very grandiose, malignant tendencies. And that just means they tend more toward the severe end of that narcissism spectrum. So more coercive control, more kind of threatening behaviors, more intimidation, things like that. So got out of that relationship, thought I want something totally different, but I hadn't healed. Like I hadn't made sense of like, oh, this is kind of what I grew up with. That's why I ended up in this relationship. I knew I just wanted something very different. And I got different, but I just got another type of narcissist. And that's why I'm so passionate. I talk about my book, Six Types of Narcissists, because it's really important that you know it can come packaged differently.
Mhm.
So the vulnerable narcissist, presented very differently, very nice. I thought we had the same values, but a very victimized story, how life again hadn't treated him fairly. So me being a therapist at the time and just a very agreeable, kind person, I thought, oh, well, he's so much potential. Like he's really nice. We have the same values. With my like help and support, like we're gonna grow together and things are gonna be great. So I had a few like kind of gut feelings like something is off, but again, hadn't made sense of narcissism at the time. So we get married, and it's revealed after that he has a sex addiction. And so then we start that whole process. And that was um, such a hit to the gut and such a betrayal trauma. So basically, very, very early after we got married, started going into treatment for his addiction.
Mhm.
And it was really during that process that I started to see things differently. The word narcissism was thrown around in our therapy time together, but hadn't fully made sense of it. And at the end, toward the end of that relationship, is really when I remember the moment when it all kind of came crashing down. Where, recovery from an addiction is like a 3 to 5 year process, and after a couple months, he was like kind of done with it. I think he liked it at first for the validation and attention it gave him, but then once he saw it was going to be hard work, it was kind of like, I don't really want to do this anymore. So I was excitedly sharing about my goals for the next year. And then I was asking him what his are, and I knew how important it was that he had goals and that he was, dedicated to getting better. And he just kind of flippantly said, nah, I hadn't really thought about it. I hadn't really given any thought to it.
Mm.
And it was like in that moment, all the betrayals, all the things that hadn't made sense that I had put on this psychological shelf that came crashing down. And I was like, this isn't me. And there's nothing I can do to fix this.
Yeah.
And it was a heartbreak, but freeing at the same time because I'm like, I can't fix this. I can't do this. This isn't me. And that's finally when I turned to like, what in the world else could be going on? That's when I understood narcissism.
Right. And I want to talk about you because as you move through these types of relationships, it's so natural to think, is it me? Am I,
Mhm.
what am I doing? What am I not being? Am I not enough? This, that, the other thing. What
Yeah.
sort of meaning were you giving to
Mm.
when it, from your dad to the first
Hmm.
husband to the second husband? What were you, what meaning were you making out of all of that?
I just always felt like, theoretically, you can have a healthy relationship, but I didn't feel like that was true for me. I felt like I had to find somebody who was also kind of broken, like I was also broken, and then we could heal together. But I didn't feel, I was making it mean that I can't just kind of go after what I want or what feels healthy. Like I have to earn it. And so I was so used to being in that helper, fixer, uh, pleaser, just continue to try to improve the relationship. Like I always thought we're just one insight away from making this work. So it's like happiness and fulfillment and having a good relationship was always on the other side of whatever the current struggle is.
Yeah.
And that's just very much what I was caught into and didn't recognize how I was continuing to stay in those kinds of relationships and didn't recognize the work I needed to do on myself to recognize that I didn't have to keep kind of replaying this trauma. I needed to heal and then find also a healthy partner.
Right. And it's exhausting as well because as you're moving through all of that and the people pleasing and the let me do more and let me try harder,
Yeah.
it's just so taxing on the body, on the mind, on the heart. And of course, there are the symptoms of post-betrayal syndrome, classic symptoms of betrayal and self-betrayal and from others. Were there any physical symptoms or mental, emotional that now you're thinking about it, you're like, oh yeah, you know what? I was walking around with this symptom or that one.
Oh, for sure. I mean, like physically exhausted, drained, confused, anxious so much. I felt a lot in my chest and in my stomach, like not being able to sleep, not being able to eat, just the constant rumination. I know with so many of my clients, therapy and coaching, like that's one of the big things we hear about, right? Is just how do I stop ruminating, feeling so stuck, so exhausted. And you're right. We don't even realize how when we're in these relationships, 90%, sometimes 100% of our energy is going toward trying to manage what's going on in this other with this other person. And we're giving all of our energy, all of our resources and time to a toxic relationship. And then the good people and the other agreeable people in our life and the healthy people get the leftovers and very little. So yeah, it was totally out of balance. Like all my energy, all my effort, everything was going to this relationship and trying to make it work.
Yeah.
Um, it's
So
just
common,
exhausting.
and that's what we see all the time. And then the more we're doing that, and over time, of course, now we're affecting completely the adrenals have tanked,
Yeah.
suppressing the immune system. Just now we have symptoms and illnesses, conditions, even disease, because the body is not meant for this type of continuous and unrelenting stress,
Mm-mm.
and it
No, the
just keeps
chronic
going
nature of
on
it.
and on and on. So let's now talk about the agreeableness. Where does
Yeah.
that fit into all this?
So I always like to make the caveat that anybody can get in a narcissistic relationship. Like we could be born into it. It could be a person you work with. Like any of us can find ourselves in a relationship or dealing with a narcissist. But I think we can be curious about why we stay. And what I've found is that with narcissistic abuse survivors, the number one personality trait that they most have in common is they're very agreeable. And that's so much more than just being a pleasant, go with the flow kind of person. That actually is broken up to like into five different categories of what agreeableness is. And that's why I'm really excited to talk about it because once you understand agreeableness, you if you are an agreeable person, you're going to hear this and go, yeah, isn't this what everybody does? Like, isn't this the worldview everybody has? Aren't we all kind of trying to do our best and assume the best in other people? No, we're not, especially if you're talking about a narcissist. So happy to break that down if you'd like
Yes,
me to.
please.
Okay. So five different categories: modesty, morality, altruism, sympathy, trust, and cooperation. So, what do each of those mean? If you're an agreeable person, it means you're high in all of these things. And so, modesty basically means you don't like to claim that you're better than other people. You don't find yourself going around touting about your achievements. You tend to just quietly kind of go about your work. You do your thing. You're more likely to ask what somebody else is doing, what kind of achievements they have. Even at work, like you're the type of person who goes in, you do your work, you're not really talking about it, sometimes to your detriment, because you're not a person that's going around saying, hey, I'm doing this, and hey, this was my part. You're just doing your job and you're going home. Morality has to do not necessarily with your values or religiosity. It can, but basically, you don't see a need for manipulation in dealing with others. You tend to just be very upfront and sincere. So when you're in relationships, you don't think, how can I manipulate them to get this? And how do I have control of this situation? You just want to show up. You just want to be authentic. You just want to have an open, honest conversation. You also tend to be altruistic, and that's that sense of you want to do good for the sake of doing good. You don't do good and be like, how are they going to pay me back? You don't see it as transactional. You just show up. You see it as a form of self-fulfillment, not self-sacrifice. You also tend to be very sympathetic, meaning you're very tender-hearted, you're compassionate. You can easily feel the pain of others and are easily moved to pity and sympathy. If you see somebody crying, if you see them upset, even if you hear about it, you may not even know why they're upset. It may not even make sense to you, but you not only understand it, but you feel it. So if you see somebody upset or crying, like you are going to be affected by that. It also has to do with trust, and that means you assume that other people are fair and honest and have good intentions. So I know that this can change as we get into narcissistic relationships. You might find after several of them that you're like, I think everybody's a narcissist now, but that's not your default. Like you mainly assume people are well intended, and that's part of what happens in these narcissistic relationships. You don't assume that they're a narcissist. You are, like we were talking about, more likely to assume, well, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm not saying things right. Like maybe I do need to be more patient, more giving. Maybe we're having a miscommunication. Maybe it's a mismatch in love languages. All the things. You don't assume that they have bad intentions, at least not at first. And then finally, cooperation. That's willing to compromise. You want to collaborate. You care about what's best for relationships, for the system, not what's best for you. In fact, you're likely to even kind of dismiss or, deny your own needs if it's going to best serve the system.
Yeah. You know what's so interesting? These are all qualities that are so admirable and beautiful and make us
Yeah.
so open-hearted and loving
Mm-hmm.
and kind. And the reason why we could be a great friend or
Mm-hmm.
a great partner. And these are the very qualities that for a narcissist, and I want you to
Mm-hmm.
speak to this, it's like a magnet
Yeah.
because they sniff this stuff out. What I see within the PBT community is so often there's this sort of inclination to shut that down because they're
Yeah.
like, well, I'm not opening up my heart again. I can't trust again. I don't, I'm not going to do this or that and the other thing. And that for me is the biggest crime because if you have
Mm.
such a beautiful heart and it's just, unfortunately, someone took advantage of that, instead of healing that and becoming stronger for it, so many people choose, well, I'm just going to keep everyone at a distance, or I'm just not going to
Yeah.
let anybody get close to me because this pain was so great. I can't risk that level of pain again. But
Yeah.
it's really, and I use the same example all the time because everybody just gets it. It's like, let's say you love cooking and you burn yourself on the stove and you're like, that's it, never cooking again. All right. Not fair to you.
Yeah.
Not fair to you. So let's talk about now the narcissist and the agreeable person.
Yeah, exactly. So all the things that you are, which I'm so glad you said that, those are beautiful qualities. And I think I'm kind of on the maybe the opposite end of that. Like I don't want the narcissist to take that from me. So at the end of my relationship, I was like, I'm never going to let somebody tell me who I am. Like I'm not going to let them take that from me. And I know it can take a while to get there, but that's ultimately the goal of healing. But all the things you tend to be, that you are empathetic and cooperative and assume the best, narcissists are on the opposite end of that. So narcissists are highly disagreeable. So they're low in all the things that you are high in. So trust how you seem, or you tend to see the best in people and assume people have the best intentions. They actually see other people as selfish and devious and even potentially dangerous and harmful. So, from a narcissist perspective, they see the world in a very competitive place. It's a dog eat dog world out there. I've heard narcissists say, I'm going to get mine and I'm going to get to the top and I'm going to take down anybody who's in my way. And that is how they view the world. And you've either heard them say that or you felt it if you've ever dealt with a narcissist. Like that is how they treat people and see the world. They also believe that for the morality aspect, instead of being sincere, they believe there's a certain amount of deception that's necessary in relationships. So they are actively thinking, how do I control? How do I manipulate? How do I gaslight? But it like comes naturally for them. Just like you don't have to think about being an empathetic person, they don't have to think about being deceptive.
Yeah.
And I know that's such a shift in worldview, like when you are an agreeable person, but this is why I want people to hear this and get this. Narcissists are not seeing or interacting with the world the same way that you are.
And,
So,
and before you continue with that,
yeah,
I just want to bring this up. This is why there are so many people, they're betrayed and they feel so, they're like, why did I see? How did I not know? How did I not see this coming?
right,
And they're so angry with themselves. And I want to remind you, you don't know how to think that way. You don't know how to think that way. And that's why you weren't prepared for it. You didn't see it coming. You don't know how to do that. And that's
right,
beautiful. That's a beautiful thing. Anyway,
right.
continue.
No, great point. You were so right. So another category in the morality, or I'm sorry, we just did morality, the altruism part.
Mm.
Narcissists don't do things for the sake of doing good. They do good for the sake of being seen by others. They will do good if they can get validation, if they can get supply, meaning that validation, attention, admiration from other people. But they don't see doing good as, oh, self-fulfillment. I feel good helping them. They actually see it as a burden, as an inconvenience. So you can imagine how this plays out in your relationships. You might think, why can they be so nice and so helpful to other people? Like they go drop everything to help their friends and everybody at work loves them, but at home, they can't pick up milk for me. Well, because who's going to praise them for that? Like that isn't any kind of, they don't put coins in the relational bank account that nobody can see. So they don't see any point in doing good just for the sake of doing good. They also tend to be quite uncooperative. They are more likely to intimidate and bully others to get their way. So whereas you are valuing cooperation and collaboration, you care about what's best for the system and the relationship. They care about what's best for them. And they are more interested in getting their needs met than even addressing or seeing that you have needs at all.
Yeah.
They also tend to not be modest. They do not mind bragging or coming off as superior. So, whereas you are maybe even downplaying the things that you're doing or not talking about them, they're bragging about it to work colleagues. Everybody knows what they have done, what they've contributed. All your family, when friends are around, it's always what they're doing, what they're achieving, and they don't care or don't even think about coming off as bragging to them. That's just what you do. Um, and finally, the sympathy, they don't have that care for other people. They are not strongly affected by human suffering.
Mm.
So I know this one is really hard for agreeable people to get to because caring about others is just so innate. It's just so who you are. You can't imagine that they don't care. But this is true if you've ever been in a narcissistic relationship and you're crying and they don't care. You're crying or upset and they go to the next room. You've just had an argument and you can't calm down for hours and you can't sleep and they're sleeping like a baby.
Right.
Like they do not have that same heart, that same care that you do. They can simply turn it off because they were really never affected in the first place.
Yeah. So, okay. So someone is just hearing this, watching this, saying, oh my gosh, that sums up all of my relationships.
Hmm.
And they're feeling, because I'm very empathic and I'm feeling that sucker punch that they're feeling right now.
Yeah.
What does that person, what's the first thing you would recommend they start to do? Because for me personally, I think it's all an inner game. We need to strengthen
Yep.
ourselves and then we can handle everything around us. And that's what happens when you move through the 5 stages. But walk us through, the person now sees that's exactly who I'm living with. That's
Hmm.
exactly who my, family member is, my partner is, my coworker. What do they do?
Hmm. So the first place I start with all my coaching and therapy clients is you have to understand the room that you're in. You have to understand what you're dealing with. And this is why it's so important to understand agreeableness and to understand who you are. And I totally agree. It's an inner game. It's what we can do. You can't take your agreeable glasses and try to understand a narcissist. You will stay stuck. You will stay ruminating. It will not make sense to you. And you will spend months, years, if not decades, trying to make it work because you're still assuming they see the world like you see it. And they don't. And they don't value the things that you do. And they are not making connections. They care about control in relationships. So the first thing you have to do is understand how narcissists think. This is where I start my clients out, not from a sense of, oh, let's just spend all of our time thinking about the narcissist because we don't want to get stuck there. But if you don't understand the context of what your symptoms are, if you don't understand where they come from, then you're more likely to blame yourself. So you're like, why am I so anxious? Why do I ruminate? Why can't I get over this? Why am I depressed? Why am I unmotivated? Well, you know, if you don't understand the room that you're in, if you don't understand what environment you've been in, then you tend to blame yourself. So we have to make sense of who the narcissist is, understanding how they're highly disagreeable, understanding their makeup and what they do and why they do what they do. So you can have that same kind of realization I did, like, oh, this isn't me. And I
Right.
can't fix this because I'm not causing it.
And I just want to be mindful and compassionate to the idea that this is a harsh realization,
It is.
because this is I think so often we want something so badly that we put on the love goggles and the rose colored goggles and everything else to try to see things from a lens that is what we want more than
Yeah.
what is. And
Yeah.
that's a hard thing to move through. So realize who that person is, because you can't change what you're not aware of. Awareness is always first.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, so now they know who they're working with. Now what?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, now you have to look at what are the consequences of continuing to do what you're doing.
Mhm.
Because change can be scary. The unknown is scary. Sometimes we stay where we are, not just physically, but emotionally, because we're scared of what that change is going to mean. Like you said, seeing this, that's part of the reason people don't see it for a long time. Of course, there's betrayal blindness and other things that are going on where it's hard for us to see the betrayals that are happening in relationships where we should be able to trust someone. But you have to look at the consequences of staying where you are, of not setting boundaries, of continuing to treat the narcissist like they are an agreeable person because they're not. So I encourage people to start looking at what have you sacrificed to keep the peace? What's it going to cost for you to stay where you are? It's draining and taking away from the good people in your life, the other agreeable people, if you continue to invest all your time and energy into this narcissistic person. Because a lot of times, being an agreeable person, you feel like you're being a bad person or something wrong with you if you start to pull away from that relationship.
And
Yeah.
there's something coming up too. I kid you because again, I'm just trying to feel what everybody's feeling. They're like, well,
Hmm.
you know what? It's great now that I know that. Now I can really help them change.
Right.
Speak to that.
Yes. So it's important to know that, okay, well, think of it like this. So if I said to all the agreeable people out there, tomorrow and forever, I want you to start being very antagonistic, very rude, very high conflict. Don't care how you come across to other people. Brag all you want and be very uncooperative. Tell me how easy it would be for you to do that. Like,
Possible.
you'd be like, I don't know who I am. Like, I don't know how to function that way. That is that is how hard it would be for a narcissist to start being empathetic. I think we have such a hard time with that because we're like, but this is healthy. Like it's good to care about other people. That should come naturally, but it doesn't. Narcissists are wired differently, and that'd be a whole other podcast we could do on that. But personality traits tend to be very rigid once they are, once they're formed. And so narcissists don't change. We tend to continue being the way that we've been, and you aren't going to change them. I mean, look at how much you've already done. If you were really in control and it was within your responsibility and ability to be able to change it, it would have changed. It would be different at this point.
And I see everybody now they're thinking, well, they've been through so much. They've had
Yep.
such a hard life. They've had their own trauma. Like, of course, the person betrayed or the one on the receiving end, they have too.
Hmm.
But somehow they put that completely aside because they're protecting, the
And
betrayal.
it's one of the biggest myths. Yeah, it's one of the biggest myths actually that childhood trauma creates narcissism. That's actually not the case. Most people who have childhood trauma are more likely to go on to become anxious adults, not narcissists.
Mhm.
So the fact that they've perhaps had a difficult childhood, that's valid and that's legitimate. And they should get therapy and help for that and work through that and heal. But past trauma isn't an excuse for current trauma.
Mhm. And I
And I
I
encourage,
say a very similar thing. There
yeah,
is no excuse, zero for betrayal. You get your all the support you need, but betraying someone is a choice.
it is.
Very
Right,
important choice.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this antagonistic default that narcissists have might, like, again, be their default, but they still choose to betray you. They choose to be manipulative. It comes natural to them to do so, but it's still a choice. Just like you can be empathetic and choose not to act on it.
Exactly.
But you choose to.
Chelsea, what do you want to make sure everybody knows as we wrap up?
That it is so important that you understand how agreeableness has impacted you, your relationships, the way that you see the world, and that narcissists are not agreeable. They don't value those things. They don't value being moral or modest or altruistic. So, because you are an agreeable person, some of the things that you have to do in a narcissistic relationship, like set boundaries, like disengage, like practice gray rock, where you're responding, very minimally, that's going to feel uncomfortable and unnatural for you, but that doesn't mean you're being mean. Doesn't mean you're being a bad person, doesn't mean you're being selfish. It means you're working within the reality of this relationship.
Yeah.
You've tried the empathy, you've tried the compassion, setting boundaries, maybe perhaps having to walk away from a relationship or just changing the way that you think about the relationship, accepting, okay, this is how they're going to be. And if once people show me who they are, I have to believe them. Like you're not being mean or being bad. You're not giving up. You're not being unforgiving or unloving to accept the reality of your situation.
Actually,
That's
you're
not on
not
you.
enabling, which I think is a really important thing too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you really see it, then you will stop enabling that behavior as well. And enabling isn't loving.
Yeah. Beautiful. Where do we go to learn more about you and the great work you do?
Yeah. So you can, if you resonate with this and you're like, I want to learn more, you can get it all on my website, chelseabrookcole.com. I have quizzes. I have a free newsletter where I continue to help you heal. And of course, my book, If Only I'd Known, talk about 6 different types of narcissists and not only understanding them, but how to heal and how to connect it to your childhood as well, to understand your adult narcissistic relationships and all of that.
Chelsea, you shared so much with our audience today. I know they're taking that deep breath, thinking,
Yeah.
okay, here we go. We have to face it, feel it, of course, so we can heal it. So I appreciate you and all you shared.
Thank you.
I want to thank Chelsea for sharing her wisdom, her story, and her beautiful insights with us today. Stay in touch with her by going to chelseabrookcole.com, and we'll have all of her information in the show notes at thepbtinstitute.com/podcast. Here's my biggest takeaway. For those of you listening who are finally connecting the dots, take a deep breath. Awareness is the first step. Healing is absolutely possible, and you are not alone. You're stronger than you realize, and it's situations like this that truly tests us. And you don't have to do this alone. If you're ready to move through the 5 stages from betrayal to breakthrough, or if you're a coach and want to move others through the 5 stages, join us for certification. You can find all of that at the PBT, as in post-betrayal transformation, thepbtinstitute.com. Finally, subscribe, rate, and review if this episode helped you. Can't wait to be with you next time, and here's to your breakthrough.